God says, if a journey in faith is a journey that says that a man who wants faith can do faith, can be faith, and real faith, and true faith, which is what he calls it. True faith is not blind faith. Blind faith is just faith where a person just says that God is what they listen and what they decide. Absolutely, they'll do anything and everything that they attribute to what God wills them to do because that's how it works with them. That's blind faith. And there is very few people that can say they have that kind of faith because blind faith is absolute faith where a person says, God said this and this is what's absolutely right. And so I do this. And when they do that and they do it every time without question, which people can do. And when people speak to God and God speaks to them, but when God speaks to them, maybe on occasion, the few occasions where they hear him, where they know that it's him and they are convicted in their belief that it's him, they're the ones who say, I believe it's God. I believe he said this. And so I will follow through with what he asked me to do. That's blind faith because if the only times that you hear God in that way are the times that you follow to the T, his direction, that you are doing something that down the road may be wrong if you hear wrong because the enemies, which is not so to speak, is a real thing. The devil gives the intrusive thoughts or gives the thoughts that tell us to go in the direction where sin is where we want to go or sin is where we need to return to. If sin is what we've been doing, then we can say that sin is something that doesn't have to be our drive in life and share in our life that we can say we love to do because when sinning is fun, but sinning is wrong and sinning is something to a different degree for every person. Sinning is something that's written out in the Bible and 10 Commandments, pretty plain and pretty clear, but there's also a whole lot of different permutations and variations of what people perceive sin to be, and they make up their own laundry list that's probably way longer than anything that the Bible could ever encompass too. Sinning of that kind is the sinning that people just create in their own minds, and they attribute it to the validity of it by what they perceive as the interpretation that the 10 Commandments are able to give them, and they're able to explain to people that why something they do is a sin when it's not clearly stated on the 10 Commandments, which is the 10 Commandments of life that drive life into a better direction by not being the things that people should be ignorant about as being right and wrong because they are the absolute wrong thing, and they're described in the Bible as the wrong by the 10 Commandments that describe them. And if you don't know what they are, and I don't know what they are, but I have an idea, they're pretty basic, fundamental common sense things too, then you're the person who can say, doesn't need to say all the different permutations of sin or variations of faith that can come from one Christian foundation that Christ is the originator of is true. When Christ is the originator of Christian faith, and the Christian faith that created what is the Catholic Church, the Baptist Church, the Lutheran Church, the Protestant Church, and all the variations of the Christian or secular churches of Christian denomination that has no denomination of anything related to Christ, there's different variations, have different interpretations and different explanations and different perspectives on how to look at the Bible is true. They all don't look at the Bible and say this is the way we look at it because this is the only way to look at it. They say that for them it's true, but they don't say that for everyone else too, who has the same conviction in the strength of their faith and the strength of how they believe their faith is the faith that is worth following. Because when a faith has a worth and the faith is worth following, then it's a worth that God sees and God accepts, and God says, your faith is not the same as the faith that Christ intended, but the faith that you have is a faith that's intended to be followed because I permit it to be followed, and I permit you to exist within that faith. And when that statement right there is blasphemous into some faith, then when I say that I'm a Catholic, and I wouldn't say that about the Catholic Church, I'd say that at Catholic Church if God told me, say it related to the Catholic Church. And if excommunication was a Catholic, was was a nail in the coffin for me or whatever they want to come after me, I still call myself Catholic, and I still do the cross, and I still do the prayers, and I still do all that all that shit that the Catholics do because I'm Catholic. I don't care if somebody goes ahead and decides to excommunicate me and put me on a list and say, you're not whatever excommunication means. That's a man doing something that he interprets. And if God says, hey, man, he listens to God too, and he heard the wrong thing, even though he's the Pope or somebody, bishop or somebody high up, or just some deacon or somebody who just makes rules, right? or whatever, some guy who just read the form or read the complaint and decided, yeah, this sounds legit. Let's excommunicate him. Excommunication is a serious thing. And I don't know anybody who's been excommunicated from the Catholic Church. And if there have been those who excommunicated for saying they talk to God, then why would they be excommunicated from a church that believes that faith is about a high-end pie sky Superman that exists and talks to them but doesn't talk to anybody else the same way? If they talk to them that way, God could talk to anybody any way he wanted to too, or the exact same way. The strength of what they hear God's voice in their own ear or mind or heart is the strength that they perceive. It's not the strength that somebody at the tippy top of a Catholic church says is the right way and the only way that anyone can really say that they heard God speak. Because if God speak is only limited to those in the highest office of those religions, then it's a really limited faith that really doesn't put a lot of faith in God to be able to do anything and absolutely anything. Why wouldn't God speak and say, hey, you, lowly you, the one who nobody respects or nobody likes, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to share it with everybody and say that God said that you're saying it, but God is the one who's giving you the words, not me, but God giving you the words. That's God speaking to someone, speaking through someone. When they speak out loud, the words that God speaks to them, through them, and voices through their voice, the words that he says are the voice of God speaking through someone who doesn't have to have the strength of faith that someone at the tippy top of a faith that is the absolute pinnacle of just the rigor of having risen to that position because of the respect and of the work that they've done to spread the faith, to grow the worth of the faith of the Catholic Church. That little, the few minutes I've been speaking could be blasphemy to the Catholic Church. And if it's blasphemy to the Catholic Church, I do care, but I'm not going to worry about the Catholic Mossad coming after me. You know, I don't know anything about that kind of stuff, but if it exists, then okay. If God doesn't talk to me and God doesn't talk to anybody, then God doesn't talk to you too. So why should I care about what you say just because you got a title and a robe and all that fancy stuff that you do? And there's a lot to respect in all of that, because to believe someone in that position is someone that's worth what they say, is someone that's worth what they say for a reason. And a scholar who knows his faith is a scholar that's worth listening to, because if no scholar ever heard God's voice or ever heard God speak to them in whatever way they spoke, then they wouldn't be the people that could lead a church. Isn't true. You could be a scholar, you could be an academic, understand your faith inside and out, be able to explain it, be able to spread it, be able to share it, be able to have the faith be something that you're a part of, get a paycheck and grow it, but not have the faith that you say is worth everybody else to have. You may not believe in God and be able to sell that to people pretty easily if you're an academic with intelligence enough to separate, compartmentalize your belief and the belief that you're selling or you're shilling, which is what you're doing, because when you're not a person that really ascribes to that faith, and you're just someone who's putting in hours and doing a job, and if that grows the faith in a real way, you're doing God's work no matter what, and you're worth God, is what he's saying to you whenever he decides he's going to speak to you and say, hey, buddy, you don't believe in me, but you tell people all about me, and you do a great job. So I'm going to give you a little boost on this right now and let you understand that I believe in you, and here's something that I'm saying to you or I'm going to do to you so that you believe in me a little bit more. To some, that's a miracle, and a miracle is a miracle to some who know what miracles are. But when miracles happen to me all the time, God's timing is something that I've come to understand is a miracle, but he can do it in such a small way where it's almost something that people would say, no, that's just coincidence. But coincidence after coincidence after coincidence after coincidence, I couldn't recite them to you. I could start keeping notes, and God says, no, you're not going to keep notes. That's not the point. The point of it being so subtle is for you to have still the doubt of being a person that doesn't really believe what he hears when he talks to God. Because to have blind faith, believe that God talks to you in every single way, is just to eliminate the possibility that the enemy, the devil, can interfere in your life. Because if God is real, then the devil probably is real too, is what God can say. Is a pretty common sense thing that people can use as a common sense explanation to, something about faith. If the devil's real, why doesn't God exist? Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, maybe he is, maybe he isn't, maybe, all this maybe. God is infinite and God is everything, and God is what we know is true. For me, is true, and true is something that I've found in a way that I cannot tell you more than anything, that God is here with me. And when I speak to God and I share what God says to me, I am dumbfounded as to why I would be the one who could hear him in any kind of way. But when I know that I can do things that I haven't been able to do before, but I do them in my way, I'm the one who has to doubt myself pretty much all the time. And I live not a miserable, extensive, but just a doubtful experience whether or not I'm losing my mind or not. If the things I say make no sense to people, but then something rings true in something that makes people believe that maybe this guy does really hear the God speak, then it's special to me is because it happens to me. But if it's something that happens to me, God says, it happens to you, you're the right guy to go ahead and say, it hasn't me, it happened to you too. And this is how you can also learn to hear God, because when he speaks to us all the time, there's a way that he says you can hear him just as clear. It's not true, but just as clear as God wishes for you to hear him when he speaks in a way. You hear an audible voice. The audible voice can be an internal audible voice that you hear only in your mind, but where you can sometimes hear voices that may seem like they're projected from an outside source. And I hear that I do. And God says, you can talk about that another time, is what he tells me. And that's the inner voice that I hear, and the inner voice that flows through me, and the inner voice that tells me when I speak and I allow myself to be the voice that speaks the words of God gives me. I'm not the one that permits anything. God is the one that allows me to speak the words if I speak the words. And the words are not a mishmash of my words, his words. The words are his words when I do it well, and when I flow in a speak that is fluid, elegant, and uninterrupted, and has a point to make, and isn't hesitant and isn't unsure in the way that I pick and select words to follow through with whatever it is I'm trying to say. And if I say things out of hand, and they're out of hand just for the purpose of me understanding too that if God wants to misdirect me in a direction that he doesn't say is the direction he's going to head me into, God can go ahead and say, go ahead and flow and hear the words, and that's him flowing through me. But if it's because I'm the one who's filled with pride, and I'm the one who's wrong about the way I learn how to hear God, I'm the one who takes what he gives me and say that somehow I'm special because I can say what he wants me to say because I'm not I'm this meat puppet. No, I'm not his muppet or something like that. I'm a person doesn't have a gift. I'm a person who's been gifted something. Is because I asked for it. Apparently, is what God tells me, and because I want to make a difference in life. And he said, I chose you to make a difference your way, and this is the way. And you get to do it, and you got one life, is what he loves for me to say. I got one life. I'm gonna be dead in like 50 years if the expectation of life is long for me, for a human being of average lifespan these days. I got one life. So if I think God talks to me and God shares with me things that I share with people that watch me, why the hell wouldn't I take the chance to believe it? It sounds a hell of a lot more interesting than just deciding that I'm middle aged, maybe barely. I'm going to go live on no retirement, work a 9 to 5, make minimum wage or make a little bit more, and exist how? And just wait for death to take me? No, I got one life. I got one life, and I want to live it. And if I want to dream about something ridiculous to other people and do it, and people listen to me, and I got a platform like social media that grows, and then all of a sudden I turn on the monetization on some of these social media platforms I post to, and things happen, I'm making a living doing something that I really do love to do. And I love to do for God, I love to do for me, and I love what is the amazing miracle of what reality truly can be for us as human beings who exist as we exist in our little one life, our one life that is a great life for us to be able to explore in a possible way. That great life is possible for all of us. Because when God tells me the misery that we experience in this world is a misery that we don't have to experience, because faith can remove that misery simply by us having faith in God. He has faith in us, and the faith we have in him is a faith that we can choose and understand in a greater way, that the faith of will, the faith of free will, the faith of choice is the faith we gift to him. Is not true. We give our will to God, and God drives our will because his will is our will, and he's the one in charge. It is a symbiotic, beautiful, symmetrical flow and dance of wills together. God is our will no matter what. We do as he permits us to do, no matter what. Faith or no faith, the reality of my belief and the faith I believe in God That's the truth that I know is true. And when I can choose, but I know that the choice I make is because he allows flesh, us, the flesh, the meaty part of us to be able to choose apart from his will. When he needs us to follow a plan of prosperity and growth and love, when we divert from that plan, we suffer, not by his hand, but he permits the suffering so that we learn to grow. And the reasons and purposes of why we need to grow are simply for us to expand his universe, which he created and he began, and he filled it with life that has the same purpose as us, to love, to grow our lives, to believe in him, to have faith and share it and share our lives and help each other, to lift each other up, to elevate our existence by elevating other existences that are in our lives. And when we can elevate a greater number of people because we have a gift or a skill that reaches more, when the internet is a powerful way to reach millions, even billions of people these days, the words we speak, this sounds dumb to me to say, but the words that we speak, like one man did on the Sermon on the Mount, when Christ spoke on the Mount, and he gave this civilization-changing speech, apparently, which I'm somewhat familiar with, but it was an important sermon. The most important sermon, apparently. I don't know. I'm not a theologian, but that doesn't mean that I hear God less than anybody else. The idea that faith that is only able to be prescribed by a dictation of notes and letters and words in a book that defines it simply because somebody wrote that down a long time ago, and now we ascribe that is the Word of God. It is the Word of God because he permitted it to be written, but it is not the Word of God exclusively and absolute. That's another blasphemous thing that other people in faith, in whatever faith, read the Bible, ascribe the Bible to be the Word of God, would say, this guy is a liar, and this guy is the devil's instrument. No. I'm the human part of what is the human journey, and faith too, just like anybody else. A person with faith can be a person who shares faith, but a person who shares faith can be someone that knows their faith is a faith that is dependent on them having faith in God, believing in him. When what we believe is the most important thing to us, to make us believe more in ourselves and what we can do, and when God is what allows us to be, the more that we sometimes believe is impossible, but is the more that other people live every day. The people that excel in life are the people that we can be, because they are no different than us, is what God says is absolutely true. They are no better, no less, no stronger, no weaker, no smarter, and no lesser in capability than those who have the same ability to be as smart, as strong, as skilled, as astute, alert, and as wily and witty as anyone else. It is a soul that we exist. If the soul is what's important, the soul is another topic that I've not described before. Well, it's not true. I've described the soul as an important part of our existence. And the soul is what makes us not special, just equal. The flesh is what makes us unequal. The flesh is what makes us less or better than each other. And if faith is something that people say is the dividing factor between what is less and more, a person with less faith, a person with more faith, are just those things to the people that wouldn't know it anyways. It's true. But when faith is something that can help you, that can drive you into a better existence, it's also something that can drive you into an arrogant, prideful existence too. If you feel that you have the voice of God or you have God's favor, it can make people think that they're special beyond special. Nah, we're not bugs and we're not dust, but we're things that God may say we're important until we think we're important. And once we think we're important, we're not important enough to be considered important. Because when we do important work and then we feel like we're important, we start to treat others as if we're important, then he doesn't serve our needs to be important at all to him, because he doesn't need us to be important like that. That's pride and arrogance that leads our charge. And that's what men do when they make mistakes, like change a word or change a paragraph in a book written long ago that now is called the Bible, or in one of the books. There's many books in the Bible. It's men who wrote those books, and they wrote them a long time after Christ died, and they wrote them a long time after the events happened. And they wrote them first-hand, second-hand. I wouldn't know when they were written. And the red part of the Bible that they say is a voice, is the words of Christ absolute. are just words and read. Who can confirm that? People of faith will say they just believe it. But they believe it because God told them, or they believe it because somebody else told them that said the read words mean this is exactly Christ's word. And that's another blasphemous thing I'm saying again. So if I want to keep on being blasphemous, I don't really want to, Father, but I appreciate you letting me speak whatever I speak right now. And if God tells me right now, he says, Mr. Rahman, you think that this is an exercise for you to practice talking about something about theology and religiosity and your Christianity and the different faiths, and how you, as a person who believes what I just spoke about, absolutely, truly do believe it far more than I ever could ever imagine that I would believe it and still have doubt. He says, I'm a man who can have blind faith, but I'm a man who fucking doesn't want blind faith, because if cursing is a sign of someone who does have no faith whatsoever, just because you curse, if that's your dividing line between, oh, he just cursed, that means he can't, he's not a Christian. There's no way he knows God. How am I saying cursing is a sin? God would never speak to a man who sins like that. What he says is garbage. It's not true. He has no connection to God whatsoever. So he speaks all right, but no. God wouldn't be pausing and saying, I'm a monkey man who doesn't like to be a monkey man, or a monkey man who doesn't like to be a monkey at all, because a monkey who's me isn't a monkey that God would make to be a monkey to anyone at all for free. Now it wasn't me. Oh, God, going ahead and mocking, I don't know what, mocking me and mocking anyone else who thinks I'm an idiot. Because why would I be an idiot if you're listening to me all the way to the end about something that maybe you started at the beginning and wondered, why is this guy an idiot? Or well, it's really interesting. Faith is a journey that's independent to every person. And every person who has a journey of faith is a person that can have faith of a journey in their own way. And when you have faith in your life, and faith is something that's strong, it can lead you into a greater existence that you know can be a greater existence beyond an already great existence. But when there are many people who find faith or seek faith or look for faith or want faith, when their lives are less, or lives are driven into the ground of misery because they have poverty or sickness or illness or just mental illness, or they have just circumstances that make them feel like life sucks beyond anything, or they're about to be thrown into the street, that's a faith that people shouldn't want for anyone if we can help it. And if it's a faith that I don't want for me, and I'm fighting for my life doing this nonsense that some might think is not even going to return anything. But when God says, it returns to me the understanding that when God speaks to me and he says to me, anyone can hear him, and anyone can hear, and anyone can hear something that says God speaking to them in any way that they hear. Because when people say, I heard God, or I saw the signs, signs are the most common way that people say is the way God speaks. And this is true in modern society. The signs in a text, the signs in an image, the signs in something that someone spoke and said at just the right time, when your thoughts were in a direction and you connected what they said to made it into what you knew was an answer that you needed to hear. And someone said, that's God. That's you. That what you heard was God. That's him speaking through him. He used him as his instrument to communicate with you. And God's done that forever, it's true. And now he does it a different way, it's true. And if the different way he does it with me is a different way that's different for you, then this is a difference that God says can help people to understand that faith is an infinite journey of a progression into, and not aggression, progression into a higher state of understanding faith. And when I'm not really a nitwit, but I'm someone who really doesn't have a lot of theological background in anything, and I feel that I have faith that's pretty damn impressive to me, but I don't wear it on my sleeve except here sometimes. And I'm a person who, I don't know, God says, you ain't a holy man. You're full of holes, and some of the things you say is not true. And God tells me, when you say God tells me, that's God telling you direct what to say isn't wrong. If God tells me I need a Sinach,